Hello everybody, Tash here, and I'm ready to dive into episode 7 with you. In this episode, we're going to look at all the people that could be involved in your renovation project. There are a lot. There are so many that I didn't even realize how many people could possibly be involved until I built my house here in North London. Every time an issue came up, suddenly there was another professional that had to be paid to help with that issue. It was actually quite incredible. So you won't need to have all of these people involved in any single project. You'll have a combination of these, and some of them will come under the same umbrella as I'll go through in a minute. But it is quite an extensive list, and with so many people and personalities involved, you will really see why kind of careful planning and management of a home renovation project is so important, and why I'm always banging on about familiarizing yourself with the process and the sequence so that you can know kind of when you need who and kind of how to deal with and how to manage with all the different professionals involved. In our 5-pillar process to successful renovation, the information in this episode falls under pillar 3, people. And as you probably know by now, everything I teach about renovations falls under my 5-pillar process. There'll be more information on how to get your hands on some more resources on the process at the end of the episode. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so let's get started on this list then. Let's start with the architect. So the architect will design the overall layout and the structure of the renovated space. They'll consider the materials, what it looks like, the functionality, and also all the kind of building regulations and building codes. Then we have a renovation consultant. A renovation consultant is really what I do. There's not many of us around, I find, but we kind of tend to fill the gap between an architect and an interior designer, but also with the knowledge of the kind of practical building process on site. We tend to have a close relationship with the client. We really dig deep into kind of what they want from their project. Sometimes I will bring in the other professionals, so I will recommend architects, structural engineers, contractors. So really it's having a bird's eye view of the project from start to finish, as well as trying to help the client kind of create that home that they really want in terms of a functionality, space, design that's kind of specific to their needs, and at the same time providing them with advice on other professionals, the building process, decisions they have to make, helping them with those decisions. So it's quite an involved kind of overview of the whole project, and also combined with interior design elements, as well as the layout and the more practical elements. So moving on to interior designer. So the interior designer would mainly focus on the aesthetics and the functionality of interior spaces. So they would be more focused on perhaps some layouts, furniture layouts, selecting colours, materials, and kind of furnishings to enhance the overall design. Okay, the general contractor. So obviously one of the main professionals on the project. So the general contractor will manage and oversee the entire renovation project, usually in terms of kind of the construction of it. So they would coordinate subcontractors, scheduling, ensuring the work is completed to the specs laid out. Next, let's explain what a project manager does. So the project manager will coordinate various aspects of the project. They would also possibly work on the scheduling, the budget. They would be in charge of the kind of communication between the different stakeholders. So that could be between the client, the contractors, the suppliers, and they're really there to make sure that the project runs smoothly. Structural engineer is the next one. So the structural engineer assesses and designs the structural elements of the building. So they will ensure that whatever steels, beams, whatever gets put in place, they ensure that the calculations for those are done absolutely correctly. They need to ensure that the building is being built correctly and to safety standards, and that everything complies with the regulations. So they have quite an important role in the project. So let's move on to party wall surveyor. So if you're doing any kind of project where you're near or close to neighbours, you will more than likely need a party wall agreement, which is an agreement with your neighbours about any shared boundaries or walls, and the party wall surveyor will help you get those agreements in place. And then we're moving on to a rights to light surveyor. So this is one you don't always need, but when you are building your extension close to someone else's window, this is where a rights to light surveyor will come in. So the rights to light surveyor will, when new developments or constructions kind of threaten to block or significantly reduce the amount of light reaching a neighbouring property, then a rights to light then a rights to light surveyor will be consulted to assess the potential impact. So they will do calculations, they go into the property where the light might be blocked, they'll carry out certain tests, they'll write a report about it, and they'll just kind of assess any impact that your building might have on your neighbour's existing property and their light, and they can then provide recommendations, or you might need to make changes in your design if you are blocking the light. But that's quite a complicated one, and the issue usually comes up on larger scale projects. But it's good to know that if you're thinking about doing a project and you might see you're building quite close to a neighbour's window, then this might be someone you might need. Moving on to a civil engineer. So a civil engineer deals with kind of the site grading, drainage, and kind of any other aspects that are related to the external environment and infrastructure around your site or underneath what you want to build. A mechanical engineer, so this person would focus on kind of the heating, the ventilation, any air conditioning systems, and they'll make sure that they meet the requirements of the renovated space. So they'll make sure that there's enough heating for the space you're building, there's enough ventilation, and so on. Okay, so a plumbing engineer, let's move on to this one next. So the plumbing engineer plans and designs the plumbing systems, including water supply, drainage, and fixtures. Sometimes on your project, if you have a tricky kind of plot or situation, you might need a plumbing engineer, but generally the architect will help you do this part. So let's move on to a land surveyor. The land surveyor surveys a property to provide accurate measurements and information on the existing site conditions. So this is usually someone you would get in before your architect starts drawing up the plans. So they would kind of come in and do kind of a measured survey. Actually, lots of architects I've worked with don't actually like to start a project without having the entire property surveyed, which means every single thing needs to be measured, down from the size of the architrave to the size of the rooms and the width of the doorways. So this gives the architect all those numbers, all those measurements that they need to be able to construct their drawings and then design your finished project from there. So let's move on to a planning advisor. A planning advisor assists in obtaining the necessary permits from local authorities, including compliance, building regs. So a planning advisor, again, is one of the ones you usually wouldn't need, but if you're having trouble getting planning permission and perhaps the architect's a bit stuck as to why you're not getting planning permission, or you're being rejected when really they think that you should be allowed to do your projects, then this is usually when a planning advisor would come in. So they would have kind of a deeper knowledge of the planning in your area, and they could advise on perhaps where you're going wrong. They might advise on an alternative design or some changes you might make to just kind of push it over the edge for you to get that planning permission that you want. Okay, so we're going to go into the trades now. Generally, if you're using a kind of a general contractor or a builder, most of the following will just fall underneath that because they would typically provide and manage all of the following trades. But let's quickly go through them for you. So carpenter obviously constructs and installs all the kind of wooden elements such as framing, cabinetry, trim work. Mason, he works with the bricks and stones, or she, and any other masonry materials of structural and decorative purposes. Then of course we've got the plumber, who installs and maintains the plumbing systems, including pipes, fixtures and heating systems. Electrician handles the installation and the maintenance of the electrical systems, like wiring and fixtures. And then we've got a heating engineer, who installs and maintains the ventilation, the air conditioning. So the heating engineer will install kind of all of those systems. A flooring contractor will install the various types of flooring materials. Usually it's kind of more specialized, kind of hardwood or engineered wood, quite likely tiling as well, or carpet. The decorator, of course, will apply the paint and other finishes to surfaces, both interior and exterior. The roofer will repair or replace the roof, ensuring it meets all the structural and waterproofing requirements. You might require a landscape architect who will design and plan all your outdoor spaces, including gardens and any kind of patios, hard and soft landscaping features. Moving on now to the building control inspector. So this obviously would not be under your general contractor, and neither would be the landscape architect we just talked about. So moving on to a building control inspector, who will monitor the construction and the process, and to ensure that the work meets the quality standards and the specifications. So the building control inspector comes in at various stages of the build, and they will check that all the work has been done to code, it's all acceptable, it all aligns with the plans that have been drawn up. So the building control is quite an important one, because at the end of your project, you will need a signed certificate that says your project has met the building control standards required. And so it's really important to kind of satisfy the building control inspector at the various stages, or that your contractor satisfies the building control inspector at the different stages, because they do need to sign off all the important main stages to get that certificate at the end. So that's quite an important one. Technology consultant, again, this is if you might be doing quite a major project, because they will assist with integrating any kind of tech into your home, such as smart home features, security systems, audiovisual setups. An accessibility consultant. So they will ensure that the renovated space, if you need it to be accessible, or if you're building, here in the UK, if you're building any kind of new home or new property, you do have to keep accessibility in mind, because even if you cannot or do not want to add those features straight away, you have to kind of future-proof for them. So your architect has to keep them in mind. So if your brand new house or building needs to somehow be adapted for someone who needs those accessibility features in future, they need to be able to be easily done. So it just ensures that the renovated space complies with the accessibility standards and guidelines. So those particular features don't need to be installed at that very point, but they need to be able to be easily installed if they were needed in future. And then finally, we have a finance manager or an accountant. And again, this is one that we might find on larger projects, because if you need one, they will manage the budget for you, they will track expenses, and they will ensure financial accountability throughout the project. Phew, okay, so that's it. That's all the professionals that I can think of that might be involved in your building project. So that brings us to the end of episode 7 I hope that was helpful, and obviously as we go along and as you continue to learn with me, we'll go and help you find out which professionals you might need for your project. You do not need all of these, but it's good to know. Like I said, when I built the house we live in now, I did not know that all of these jobs existed in this industry. So it's good to at least know what you might come up against. But that's it. That's it for this episode, and have a lovely rest of the week. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye. For more information on my 5-pillar process for successful renovation, you can go directly to southplacestudio.com/pillars, where you'll find an introduction to the process and what each pillar covers.